y'all? It's Brandon Creasy back with Unbridled Faith. I am so excited for today's episode. I've got my friend Brandon Creasy here. We went to high school together and just seen each other the other day at Walmart, and I was like, Brandon, there you are, whatever. So anyway, I'm going to let him introduce himself, and we're going to get started with some questions, and I'm excited for y'all to hear about Brandon and his story and his testimony and what he's doing right now for God. So.
My name is Brandon Creasy. I'm a member at Buffalo Springs Missionary Baptist Church. I've been preaching, I guess now, probably the last 2 years, trying to, spread the message and do what God called me to do. But before then, it wasn't always like that. So it's just been a different page of my life, for sure.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're going to start out with question one. Y'all know I got all these questions. So, how did you start your walk with God, Brandon?
So, you sent me these questions last night, and I was thinking about them. But it's funny because I was actually adopted. So my mom and dad adopted me. I was 15 months old, and they got my little brother too. But they were avid churchgoers. My daddy was actually a preacher, and really what happened is they would just drag us to church every Sunday, whether we wanted to go or not. And so it wasn't that it was forced upon us. I think it's a good thing to take your kids to church, and the Bible teaches that too. But through that and their efforts, I feel like that's really how I started.
Gotcha.
I got to
kind of planted the seed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when they done that, it was more of it was kind of a slow process, I feel like, because I'm still trying to learn everything. I right around the time that I got saved was the time that I found out I was adopted too.
Okay.
So it was a weird time in my life, but through their efforts, that's kind of how I got started.
Gotcha. Well, that's awesome. So did they, kind of talking about your story with adoption, so did they tell you that, like? No,
actually, it's really funny. I actually figured it out because I remember I was in my house and Mom had all the pictures hanging up,
Gotcha.
And I was looking at them, and I was like, I just don't look like anybody that's on the pictures.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
So I went back. I remember going back to her bedroom, and I just asked her. I think I was like 6 or 7, and I was like, "Hey, Mom, am I adopted?" And she just her face went white.
Oh, bless her. So
she planned on telling me when I got older.
Right. I get what you're saying. So you just kind of figured it out.
Yeah, I just kind of figured it out because I don't look like anybody. So
I gotcha. Well, there you go. Yeah. Hey, well, that's all right though. So, all right. So you talked about getting saved.
Yeah.
About the same time that you found out you was adopted. So how did you find Jesus?
So it's really funny, but everybody, I believe in a time and a place. When it comes down to it, a lot of people don't think that, some people believe in baptism. Well, what I believe is in a relationship with Christ. So what happened was I was 7 years old, and I don't know what got me sitting behind the backboard with the pastor. I just really liked him. And I would always just ask him questions every morning, like, hey, what are you going to preach on this morning? What have you been studying? And I remember one time my mom actually asked if she needed to move me, and my pastor told her no, you know. And one Sunday morning he was preaching, and he was preaching on hell. I don't really remember exactly the message, and I can't even remember the prayer, but there was just a peace that came over me. And I've just known it ever since. And that's where my walk started.
I got you. Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the preacher, your mom was like, do I need to
move him? And he was like, no. And then a few weeks later, I got saved there.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned preaching and where you're preaching at now. So what led you to start preaching? Like, how long have you been preaching? Like, has this been like something you've been... It's been like a long time?
Yes. So
it's been a long time coming, or have you been like...
So what I'll do is I'll go back to that kind of same place. So where I got called to preach was actually in that same seat. That was my seat in the church.
Cool.
Yeah, so I got saved there, and then 2 years later I got called to preach. So I was called to preach when I was 9.
Okay.
But so I preached. I told my calling, not that Sunday, but the next Sunday. And I had asked my dad several questions throughout the week, and he told me to go back. And he was like, when you go back to church, you need to tell them. And I was like, okay. So I did. And I got up and I told them. And I remember from that point, I remember there was one, this is kind of just stuck in my memory, but my mom was walking around, we was doing a Christian handshake whenever I told my calling. And she was like, son, there's some things that are going to change, but it's going to be for the good, you know? And I was like, okay. So we just started booking appointments. So I preached all the way up from 9 till, well, I would say 13. but my dad died when I was 13.
Okay,
So
okay.
whenever that happened, I preached, I think, twice after he died. But he was my study partner. He was my direction to look to. And I just, eventually what happened is I got mad. I got mad at God.
Yeah.
And I turned my back on him. And then I quit preaching from 13 all the way up till, I guess, 27, so 24. So what happened is when I stopped, I remember thinking, going through high school, I remember thinking, hey, I've got to get back to this, but I just don't want to do it right now. And I still had a relationship with God. I was still praying and stuff. And I told God, I was like, well, let me just finish high school and then I'll get back to it. And he did, So I go to college and I kind of completely put it on the back burner then because I started smoking weed and I just, went down that path for a while. Well, I dropped out of school, and I remember when I dropped out of school, I moved back home. So I was living in Gallatin. I went to Ball State. But I dropped out of school, and then I just started living that life, man. I started drinking a lot, I started smoking weed a lot, and I just was like, well, I'm just going to work. And I kind of put God on the back burner. Well, in that time period, what happened was I started doing meth, got really addicted to that. I was living from place to place, didn't really have a place to call home. I was really just out there, and I'd done that for about a year and a half, 2 years. And then after that, I went to rehab. So when I went to rehab, God really started working on me, turning the wheels, greasing the wheels.
So did you go to a local rehab?
So
if you don't mind me asking,
well, I actually went to Huntsville, Alabama.
Okay.
Yeah, so I completely removed myself from the situation.
So you just kind of left.
Yeah. So I left everything, and when I went down there, the first rehab was really good, and I felt like I was getting stuff, and I knew that the end goal was to get back to preaching.
Gotcha.
I knew because God was working on me. You see, like He wasn't like, oh, you're gonna get away with not doing this. So what happened was I just went through that process. I got out and I went to a halfway house that was recommended to me by the rehab.
Gotcha.
So I got out and I went, and it was a terrible place. So there was already drugs in there. There was people doing stuff in the basement that was just crazy. They were selling drugs out of the house, and it was just not a safe environment. And I ended up relapsing. So I was going to a lot of meetings, so I had a sponsor at the time because I do like AA and stuff. But I called my sponsor at the time. And I remember, this is actually a crazy story, but I remember I was in a hotel room. I got kicked out of the house because once you use drugs and you fail a drug test, you got to leave.
Okay.
So I went to a hotel room, used the last little bit of money I had, and I remember I had a phone list. And I called every single number on the phone list, my mom included. And I was 3.5 hours away. And, I went through them, burned them all. I mean, they just didn't, nobody could come and get me. So the last number on my list was my sponsor. And I had to be out there at 11 o'clock. The next day, and I stayed up all night because of course I was high, and I remember praying. I was like, God, I just don't know what to do, and he kind of directed me to call my sponsor. So I picked up the phone and I called him. I think it was at like 9:30, and so I had like an hour and a half, and I had all my stuff. And I remember looking at the door of the hotel room and was like, if I go out there and I don't have, I was like, I'm going to leave all my stuff here. All I'm going to take with me is a backpack. And I had like all kinds of clothes. I had everything because I was living at that house. And I remember looking at the door thinking, like, if I go out there, I think this is it. Like, I'm going to die. I was like, I just really think I'm going to die. So I ended up putting down my pride, and I called him, and he was like, where you at? And I was like, I told him. He came, got me, took me back to his house, let me sober up a little bit, and then we got me back into the same rehab that I went to the first time. So when I come back, that rehab was really good.
Gotcha.
So I was defeated. I seen that it was the same thing as when I left, and it was just time. So I stayed there for 28 days the second time, and I actually think I asked them for a few more days. I think I stayed there 32 days that time.
Gotcha. Okay.
And really tried to get as much recovery in as I could. And in that time, I had been working on some stuff, and I came back here. So
Gotcha.
During that process, whenever that happened, I was still doing meetings when I came back, and I wasn't preaching yet, but I planned on going to church, but I wasn't preaching because I was only back here like 60 days. I think I stayed sober that time for like 4 months. So it was like 60 or 90 days. And what happened was I was going to meetings. I didn't have a sponsor. I wasn't working a program. And I had a relationship with God that was a little bit different than when I first started. But it really wasn't as strong as it needed to be. And so I remember I come home from a meeting one night, and the place where I was staying, I wasn't staying with my mom, but I was staying with one of my friends, and they was drinking. And I remember I was like, they had some salted caramel whiskey, and I was like, man, this smells really good. And he was like, man, do you want to taste? And I was like, nah. I was like, I just, I'm doing the sober thing. I don't want it. And he was like, man, it's literally just a taste. It ain't gonna kill you. And I was like, okay. So I'd done that, and that caused me to relapse. So when I took that, I remember the last thing that I thought before I took that was, I can start my recovery tomorrow.
Oh,
and,
I get you.
Yeah, and I took it, and I wasn't thinking nothing of it. Well, that sent me down a spiral. I started smoking weed again, then I started doing drugs again, and then, from there, I lost 5 years. I was completely out of it, and I think I was 21 at this time, so about 24 to 25, so I lost 4 or 5 years. I just started back in the, the drugs, and so what happened that got me back to this point is I finally got to where I was just smoking weed, and I was going down the road one day. I was working a job. I had a good job, and I had like $1,500 in my pocket. All my bills were paid. I had my own place. I was doing good, what I thought was good. And I remember I was driving down the road. It was actually right there in front of Sunshine in town, and I was listening to the radio. It was pretty loud, and God spoke to me and told me that if I didn't do what He told me to do, I wasn't going to be able to do anything at all. And so I turned the radio down real quick, and I'm like, no one was in the car but me. So I turned the radio down, and it was just plain as day. So I go home, and I find my Bible, of course, and I dust it off. And I mean, it was dusty. I hadn't picked it up in years. I couldn't tell you. It's probably been, honestly, I don't even think I read it in rehab. I don't think I read it. I pick it up every now and then and read something. But I remember I dusted it off, and I opened it, and I couldn't read it. I did not it just wasn't speaking to me. It just wasn't. I was so far from God, and I distanced myself so far from Him that I just felt like, I couldn't read His Word.
Gotcha.
So I remember going to bed that night, and when I went to bed, I prayed. I got on my hands and knees, and I prayed, and I said, God, I was like, if this is something that I need to do, I need you to send me somebody to help me, somebody to help me get revitalized, whatever it is. I just need you to send me somebody. And the next morning, I got up, and I was going to work, and I got a call from Brother Phil Mel, who is an evangelist, and he said, hey brother, I was just thinking about you last night. He drives trucks. He was like, I was thinking about you last night when I was driving the truck, and God told me to call you and invite you to ministry school.
Well, there you go.
And I was like, okay. So I was like, yeah, when is it? And he said 2 weeks. He said, you got 2 weeks. And I was like, okay. And so during that time, I'm still smoking. I'm not clean at all. And I remember I tried to get clean. I think it was 2 days before the ministry school, because I didn't want to, be high at the ministry school. I didn't even know what it was really. And Brother Phil just kind of explained to me what it is every year in Bowling Green, Kentucky, they have at the old Union Ministry School. They've been doing it for like 100 years, and all of these preachers from all over the U.S. they come and they get together and they talk and they do Bible studies and stuff like that.
Wow.
And so I try to get clean. I think I was clean 2 days, and I go to the ministry school, and it's really good. It's exactly what I needed. And God was really, really working on me. And I remember at the end of it, I was looking at my Bible, and I could read it.
You could read it?
I could read it.
Wow.
And I was and it was speaking to me. It was filling my spirit up.
Gotcha.
And Brother Phil was like, what are you doing over there? And I was like, man, I'm reading, dude. And he was like, oh yeah. And I was like, yeah, because I told him, I was like, man, I can't even read the Bible right now. And he was like, oh yeah. And I was like, yeah, man, God is really just opening up His Word to me and speaking to me. Well, after the ministry school, and I just try to be completely transparent and honest. After the ministry school, I get out. I'm trying to stay clean for a couple days and end up relapsing on weed. And so I'm doing that for a while. Well, during that year and that time, I started to go looking for churches.
Okay.
So I think it was October. Really around August. So this was in March. So from March to August, I'm looking for churches. I'm going to every church that I can, every Sunday, every time the doors are open. It don't matter what church it is, I'm just going. And from the ministry school, I'd actually met a man named Ron Spurgeon there. And we get a list of numbers and stuff. So I think it's one Saturday night, I call Ron, and I'm like, hey brother, where do you pastor at? And he said, Buffalo Springs. And I said, do y'all have a night service? I was looking for a night service. And he's like, yeah, we do. And so I go out there for a night service, and the Spirit's it's just working overtime, so thick you cut a knife in there. And I'm just like, okay. this is a good place to be. And so I go to service there, and it's so good that I want to go back for Wednesday night. So I go Wednesday night, and then I go Sunday night, or Sunday morning, the actual morning service. And while this is happening, see, I was still a member at Pleasant Valley where I got saved. And I was really torn because I just felt the Spirit so strong in there. I was really torn on where to go and what to do. But God told me that I was supposed to join that church, so I did. And from then, I joined the church. Let me back up a second, because I did join the church, but during that time between March and August, God actually told me to start praying for a wife. And just like he did in the car, it was kind of the same situation. And I remember hearing that and thinking, like, I've never I don't pray for stuff that's like vain like that. Like, I don't pray for money. I don't pray for stuff like that. I was like, I just pray for help and guidance and strength and stuff like that. So it was really different. But I called Ron because I had been going for a little bit, before I joined. I think only probably 4 or 5 months before I joined. That whole time pretty much I was going. And I called him. I was like, "Hey, is praying for your wife normal?" And he laughed, which is so funny. He laughed and he said, "You know what's crazy is God told me to do the exact same thing 2 weeks before I met my wife." And I was like, "What?" Like it was like a thing. So I started praying, and so a month went by, and I was working at Dollar General. I was a manager there, and a month went by, and I met my wife.
Wow.
I met her at work, and I just kind of knew. I don't know how to explain it. I just kind of knew, and she knew, and she didn't understand either. But she was out of church completely. So I will remember this vividly. So I'm going to church every Sunday. We're talking, we're hanging out. She's not spending the night over at my house or anything, but we're spending a lot of time together. And she would always like to come over on Sundays, but I would tell her Sunday morning I was going to church. And she came over real early one morning. We went and got breakfast, and she asked me, she said, why do you keep going to that church? I said, I don't know, it's just what I feel like I need to do. God told me to do, And she, she was like, oh, whatever. So she goes back to her house, and I go to church. Well, there was a few more Sundays, and then one morning she came over and ate breakfast with me again. And she was like, hey, do you mind if I go to church with you? And I was like, no. I was like, yeah, you're more than welcome to come, And so she came, and at this time, I think it was like a Sunday or two that she was coming with me. I joined the church. And then I remember praying to God. I was like, God, if she's the one that's supposed to be with me, I was like, let her join the church too. And 3 weeks later, she joined the church.
Wow.
So during that time, and we're still battling addiction. We're still not in a great spiritual place, but we're trying, And so a year goes by that we're there, and I was working for U.S. Pest. I got a new job.
Okay.
Things were starting to look up. We were still smoking weed. At this time, we had kind of been introduced to pills. We was doing those too. But we was just trying to maintain, And what happened is I stayed sober for like 3 months, stone cold sober. I stayed sober for like 3 months because I was trying to preach. I was trying to, get back into that. And she was still doing stuff. And I went to work, and I was at a customer's house, and I stole some pills from their pill jar. And what happened is whenever that happened, I went outside and finished spraying the dude's house, went outside, and it was a Xanax. So I'd done it, and I went to my next house. And I'd done Xanax before, so I didn't think it was anything big deal. And I went to the next house, finished it inside and outside, and then I blacked out, and I was blacked out for 3 days. I got arrested. I lost my job. I parked the truck. Thank God. I guess God was watching over me, but I parked the truck in a parking lot, and it was turned over for like 6 hours, and somebody called in on me and said that I looked like I was passed out. And I guess I don't know if I overdone it. I don't really know exactly what happened. There's not really a lot of like clarity on that because I don't remember, but I got arrested. My wife came and picked me up. We got bonded out. Her birthday was actually, so this was in May. Her birthday was the 13th. I got out on the 12th, and I just came, I got out on the 11th. I woke up on the 12th. I actually knew what I was doing. I woke up in her bed. And I was in full uniform, had keys. I woke up and I was in pajamas, and I was like, I got up and I was like, where's my truck? What happened? Where's my stuff? Why ain't I at work? I didn't know. And she was like, you might want to sit down. And I'm like, why? And she was like, you got arrested, you got court, all this stuff. And I'm just like, oh my God, dude. And from there, I would like to say it got better, but it didn't. It got worse. I was really upset because I had a really good job. And I was like, I don't even know what to do. And so what happened is my church found out about it. So I called my pastor and I talked to him about it and told him what happened. And what they did was they pulled my preaching license. So they didn't exclude me, but they wouldn't allow me to go anywhere and preach other than the home church and a few other places that they deemed where other people were going to be at. So that really bothered me, and it sent me on a downward spiral. And so that was in May. All that year was really, really rough on mine and hers relationship. The drugs got more involved. We was doing more and more and more, and it was just a vicious cycle. So New Year's comes around, and I'm still trying to get sober. She's trying to get sober. And when New Year's comes around, I'm like, I don't know. I got up that morning. I went and got her some pills. And then I come back and I done them. And they just made me sick. They didn't make me high. They just made me like, I just didn't want to do them no more. And so I started praying like really heavy. Like, God, I really need you to help me. I really, really need you to help me. And we went to a party that night. And I didn't smoke. I didn't do nothing. I wasn't drinking. I was the only sober person at the party, which is crazy for people to think that I was the only sober one, But I was the only sober one there. And my friend actually wrecked his truck. Or not really wrecked it, but messed it up. And he asked me for a ride home. Well, on that ride home, I heard a conversation between him and his girl. And they was talking. They was like, man, my truck's messed up. I don't know why this stuff always happens to me. And I don't know. I just felt like it was God. I felt like they were me. And I felt like God was speaking through me. And I remember turning around to them. I was like, the reason this always happens is because of the life that we're living. That's what we're doing. I was like, and he was saved too. I'm not going to say his name, but he was saved too. And I was like, we're saved. We go to church. I was like, and look how we're living. I was like, y'all are out here getting drunk. I'm out here doing pills and smoking weed. And I was like, and you think that this is pleasing to God? I was like, the reason our lives are crap is because of this. I was like, that's what it is. And they was just kind of like taken back. They was like, whoa, man, like, hold up. And I'm like,
They're like, what's wrong?
I'm like, dude, but it's because I have been convicted.
Yeah, you had already been like, this is going on inside of you. And so you're kind of like, you're talking to them, but you're talking to yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was like straight up warfare in my mind. I'm like, I'm battling stuff, And so I let them out and tell them I love them. And on the ride back was a prayer that I can't even really describe, but it was just like a heartfelt, sincere, like, God help me. I was like, because I know that there's a solution. And he told me to go back to AA. Okay. So I did. I started going back immediately. The next day I found a meeting. And when I started going, he started helping me. He started moving things in my life. And my clean date is January 7th. So I will have 2 years, January 7th of this year. And I've been clean ever since. So,
good for you.
And then from there, I think it was 6 months or 8 months that I was sober to give me my preaching license back. So that's where I'm at now.
Well, that says a lot about your church family because they didn't give up on you.
They did not. No. Best people, I hear a lot of people get burned by churches and these different type of things that happen, but I can honestly say the place where I go to church, and I'm proud of this. I'm not saying that this is like they're different.
Yeah.
They're different. They checked up on me, they helped me, and my pastor's a really good guy. I got friends in the church. They were concerned versus judging, and like they knew, and I didn't know this, but there's all kinds of people in the church that are in recovery, and I didn't know that at the time,
right?
Because like I said, we would just go for Sunday morning service, and we was kind of evading in and out because of how we was living, so we didn't want nobody to get too close. That's what it was. And so when this started happening, and I started getting sober, a lot more people started popping up, and I just told them. I mean, I was trying to. Really, what I was doing was I was saying, hey, from the time that I got arrested, I'm trying to do good. They knew that I wasn't, and I didn't tell them that I was. I didn't tell them that I wasn't. So, they were just kind of watching. But then I started going to meetings, and then that's like, they had that saying recover out loud. That's what I started doing. I just started telling them, like, hey, I'm going to meetings. I've got a sponsor. I'm doing the things. And then I just kind of let that snowball effect into them seeing that happen. And what's crazy is my wife. It's so funny how God works, but I got sober. I was sober 1 month and she got pregnant.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, well, I guess this gives me a better reason to stay sober, you know.
Absolutely.
So she got pregnant, and my son, he actually turned a year Saturday.
That's
so
awesome.
yeah, it's been wild, but yeah, so that's just kind of like where I'm at with everything, and I think that, you know, the church family is super important, but the relationships that I've built there, they've been there for us, and they love us, man.
That's awesome.
They love us.
That is awesome. I'm so glad you had that, and thank you for sharing all that. I know that a lot of that was kind of, you know, personal and stuff like that, but I know that God is definitely using you for sure,
Oh, yeah.
especially in the recovery community. So, okay. So, last question. What advice would you give your 16-year-old self? I ask everybody this question.
Okay.
And it's kind of, I know it's kind of a broad question, but every time that I ask somebody this, I always think of something different. Whenever I'm sitting there thinking, what
well,
advice
I'll
would I
tell you
give
what.
my 16-year-old
Honestly,
self?
if I had to look back at my 16-year-old self, I would say, this is going to be crazy, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know. You know, because one, I wouldn't change anything. Even like the stuff that I deal with now and the choices that have been made, I wouldn't change anything because I feel like I'm able to help more people now.
Yeah.
But if I could tell them anything, it'd be to trust in God always.
Trust in God.
Because, you know, every situation, all the situations were
Yeah.
pretty dim, and I didn't even really go into a lot of detail, but you know, they're pretty dim, and my only way out every time was God.
Yeah.
And looking back, you know, you don't see that while you're going through it.
No.
You know, you call out on him and you're like, hey, I made it through.
Yes.
But then a year goes by and you're like, man, I wouldn't have made it through without God.
Exactly.
So it's, you know.
You look back at all the things and you're like, he was there.
Yeah, he was there. He was moving all these pieces, which I think is so incredible about the Lord. It's like, you know, we read the Bible and I think that, I don't know if you've ever seen that chart where they have the Bible open and it's like all the things that connect.
It looks like a rainbow.
That's how God works in our lives.
It is how God works.
That's how God works in our life. He'll take this little piece and connect it here, and he'll take this little piece and connect it there, and He does.
Awesome.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
And but yeah, honestly, I think I lived my life how Brandon wanted to for so long to realize that I can't live my life without God.
Yeah.
So that would be my only piece of advice: is to always trust in God.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being here, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Y'all, thank you for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Be sure to share this video. I'm going to put it on Facebook. And Brandon, I just thank you for being here and just, you know, talking and, you know, being just bold enough to share, you know, your testimony and stuff. I feel like we've all got those places in our life where it might not have been the best, but
I agree.
You've always got to trust in God. So
that's right.
I'm gonna let Brandon close out the prayer. If you
Yeah.
And then we'll see y'all on the next one. So go ahead, Brandon.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I just want to thank you for today, Lord. Thank you for Briley and her efforts, God. Lord, I pray, Lord, that you would bless it, Lord, in abundance, God, that you would bless her efforts, Lord, not just here, Lord, but in her walk with you, God, that you would bless her family, Lord. I just want to thank you, Lord, for the opportunities that are given to me today, God, and I pray, God, that we would just take those to uplift you and your precious Son, Jesus. Pray, Lord, that you watch over us as we continue to go throughout the day, Lord, and that you just keep a hedge of protection around us, Lord, keep our minds focused on you, and thank you. Thank you most of all for your precious Son, Jesus, Lord, in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank y'all for watching. Be sure to, like I said, if you hit that little bell, it'll subscribe every time we put a new video out. Is what it does. So thank y'all for watching. We'll see y'all later. Bye.